Welcome back, everyone, to the Ask Dr. Be Good show, the show where we bring you the politics, the practice, and the pedagogy of public education. We have with us a special guest today, and instead of just having her come on and waiting in the back, we're going to have her sort of co-host the first part of the show with us so that we can hear her take on some of these stories that we're bringing you today. Brandy Braley is I'll let you introduce yourself. You teach for a local public school in the Dallas area. Tell us what you teach.
I get the opportunity to teach 9th and 12th grade history, and so I take on world geography, world history, U.S. history, and government economics. That's
all. Wow. In today's COVID times and small school times, sometimes you have to do extra, but I know that you are a super duper teacher. You have recently become a lead teacher around PBL, project-based learning. Is that right?
Yeah.
And before I forget, we're having technical difficulties. So if just for the sake of the sanity of our audience, let's let them know that you're on the screen, but we can't hear you. So you're on my phone, and that we've done things like that before. You know, technology tries to fool us, and we always work around these days, right? And so let's start off with what's in PubEd news in New York City, in Buffalo, not New York City, but Buffalo, New York. If you can imagine this, 100 teachers and 100 staff members resigned right before school was supposed to start. And imagine there's been a lot of uproar around COVID and safety and going back. And imagine being in a district where 80 to 100 staff members have resigned the week before school is supposed to start. I can't even imagine, but imagine being that school board that is having to sit down and figure this out with the superintendent and how they're going to, they've had to delay school. They had to delay the start of school until they could get enough staff members. So 100 staff members resigned, which impacted about 80 positions, because, you know, a lot of times you can have attrition, right? And so you can get away with maybe not filling every single position, but still, that's, so now we have, you know, parents online who don't have school. When I read things like that, I can't help but think, you know, we're doing pretty good. We think we have troubles down here, and then you read something like that, right? And one of the things that I wanted to talk about today, especially with you here, was what happens with teaching through COVID, right? We've started the new year, and I saw an article about a teacher named Miss Cluck. Her name is Miss Cluck out of Austin ISD, and she is doing remote learning, and she is a social studies teacher like you, and she went an extra mile or two or three, because what she did was she, because she teaches history, she took the history on the road. She works for Eanes Independent School District out of Boston, and she wanted to find different ways to teach instead of just lecturing in front of a webcam. And so, you know, she said, we've all been trying to figure out how to have a better relationship with kids online, right? So how can I do that? Well, she figured out a way to do that. And her way was to take herself on the road. She got the permission from her principal, and she started teaching history from different history spots around the country. And so she went to Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, and, you know, she toured local, you know, important areas in there, and had her students, who probably look like many of our students, low socioeconomic students in the Austin area, and who mostly don't get a chance to travel like some other kids do. And so she was able to go on the road and teach history from different history spots around the country. One of the things she did to sort of trick her kids into coming on was that she didn't tell her students where the next class would be from. And so that mystery encouraged her 140 students to keep showing up for the next class, just to know where she was going to be. In an interview with the American Austin Statesman, she said, Chuck Cluck compared the start of each Zoom class with a Where's Waldo moment. And so she wanted to make it fun. She tried to make it as engaging as possible, and certainly that was a very, very unusual way for her to do that. Unfortunately, she can't spend the whole semester on the road since Ains ISD will start having class soon, and she needed to be back. But I thought that was a good segue to having somebody like you on, who is not able to take to the road, but certainly has the same challenge and responsibility to engage students and to keep them coming back, so to speak. So tell us a little bit about what you've learned and how you've started being able to get so many kids to come online.
Yeah, so what I noticed is that the kids really like when it connects to them, and if we can connect the content to them, they buy in and they want to know more about it and how it played out. Because a lot of them aren't familiar with the history, and when you get the information, if it wasn't for class. So one of the things that we've been doing in class is preparing for our next project launch. And specifically in U.S. history, we're talking about intolerable conditions and communities and during the progressive era. And so I'm really excited that next Monday we're going to have a speaker from New York who works in a union, or works for a union, and they're going to come talk to the students about how during an intolerable condition in their community during this time, they were able to help community members access PPE when they weren't able to, because when COVID did hit in March, numbers were very high in New York and it was dangerous for them. And so working with the kids and letting them know about these horrible conditions, how to identify them, and what ways they can help, we're going to take that back to our community here and try and help address some of the issues that we find.
So, I'm curious, will you be using our article from New York to say, hey, did you know anything about this poor district that had 100 staff members resign? But I like, how did you find this person?
They're actually a family member, so I use Facebook a lot to help me get friends and family to come be that outside authenticity portion for my project. And so I reached out because I knew she had history working for the mayor's office. I wanted to know if she had any kind of connection to this type of work.
And I know I was part of, and one of your speakers earlier this week or last week, I lose track, was with the journalist, and she was fascinating because she was the real thing. And the kids asked some really good questions. I even asked a question. I mean, she made me curious about things. And so certainly having the authentic piece is one way of getting kids to want to be online. How does that work with synchronous and asynchronous? I mean, we talk about asynchronous, and I'll let you describe that in a minute, but then we have synchronous moments. So having a speaker there, we can't have them there all day, right? So talk a little bit how you're juggling asynchronous and synchronous moments in a synchronous district plan.
Yeah, so I know that a lot of students might not be able to get on at specific times or have the ability to be online all day. So the asynchronous allows them to complete their assignments, check in with their teachers, and make some progress and growth in their own time. And the synchronous pieces allow us to come together as a class in the same time and discuss the material, because I think it helps them connect to the material better. And we use activities in every lesson. It's not just a lecture. So it goes through some kind of activity where they work in partners or they're working as a whole group to uncover what it is we're looking for.
And so what are some extra things that you've learned to do to entice secondary kids to come on?
I have a lot of opportunities for the students to check in with the intention of checking out. I use a lot of games that connect to the content in order for them to show their mastery or get involved. And I connect it to them. I make it about them. Because it's about them, they buy into it.
So you say you make it about them. How do you do that? Because you've got very diverse kids. How do you do that?
So I give them reflection questions that allow them to identify they connect to? There's some kids that when you look at the tenements and how people live there for the rest of their life, they currently live with multiple family members and have multi-generations in a house, and they can reflect on how that affects them personally, and it connects them to the content, so they want to know more about it and more about the condition because it directly affects them.
What are some of the complaints that you're hearing from kids about their remote learning, and how are you sort of able to deal with those and maybe turn them into not continuing to be complaints and reasons why they shouldn't show up for class?
A lot of the kids are unhappy that they're not getting to be with their friends a lot, and they don't have their own forum to talk with each other and whatnot. So I like to give them the first 3 minutes of class to talk with each other and catch up, and then the last 3 minutes of class as well, so that they are able to be, because I know you have, and then going into the learning will facilitate a better model in the classroom to where we're able to hold their attention for longer periods of time because they now respect us for respecting them and their needs.
Are your students, because I think, I may be wrong, but I think you're teaching a lot of the same students you had last semester and this summer?
Yes, I do have a lot of returning or moving students. Yes. Some of them, this is my third year having them.
And have they changed since COVID started? Have you seen a difference in those students? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of behavior changes, some positive and some negative, but I think some of the most notable are my students that were newer to school last year and are continuing with us this year are more involved. I have some students that weren't as active in the classroom last year, but now that we've gone online, have showed up for every synchronous session and participates actively. And so for me, that's a big win.
So you have actually had students who were just not participating in face-to-face class, and now they are showing up to every synchronous moment.
Yes, I think I can count on one hand the number of words from one particular student last school year, and now that we're online, they talk in every single lesson about every subject that we've been talking. So it was a big surprise to me. I was really excited about it.
Huh. Now, have you had the opposite with any students that, any AB students that have not been able to function in that environment?
They're more reserved. They still answer questions at a higher rate, but they like to complete their assignments on their own in a more asynchronous environment.
And so we've been batting about that asynchronous, synchronous terms. Your district does an asynchronous plan. What does that mean for you as a secondary teacher?
It gives me more time to connect with my students in the morning to work with small groups and work on specific skills for those students. It also gives me the opportunity to have thoroughly planned out lessons that have activities that will be engaging for the students. And I also have that time period in the afternoon to connect with them. And we found it meets their needs better because we had so many issues with morning connection.
Huh. And what kind of issues?
Students weren't waking up. They got used to coming in during spring break or staying up late, talking to friends, or taking on more responsibilities at home. And because of that, they were oversleeping, not making the meetings at 8 o'clock in the morning, and so they talked to us, really. They came to us, so we would really benefit from the afternoon, and our administration heard them and listened to what they were saying and allowed us to adjust our schedule for them.
Okay, so I like that, student voice and choice, huh?
Yes, very much so.
And so I know your district is going to be going back, we think. What will that look like for you when you have you'll be in face-to-face and you'll have students still at home? Actually, no, you're high school, right?
Yes, so we're still going to be at home, but I know that some scholars are going to get the opportunity to come back, and they'll be able to use their some of the flexible social distancing and still have the ability to learn.
So this has been a confusing time for you guys, but what I'm seeing, and I think I can speak for your district, I think I heard that high school will not be coming back at this time for the same reason the other high schoolers aren't in other districts, and that's because, frankly, no district knows that they have room for everybody, right? And yes. So I know we have been giving surveys out, and we have about a third of the kids coming back, which is a good way to start since we have everybody in the same classroom. Now, I'd like to transition over because we've been talking about the hardships and that secondary teachers, especially with not knowing if they're coming back to the classroom, not coming back, and for right now not coming back, that can oftentimes lead to anxiety and so forth, and mental health issues. And I like to have mental health segments. And so let's transition into one where I think I've got some good news in that area, and that is that the state of Texas yesterday went ahead and introduced a project. It's called Texas Restore Project. TEA, Texas Education Agency, has done. They have said that they understand that kids will need help with adjusting and managing their trauma that some of them, not all of them, but some of them did get during. Also understand that a teacher and staff members oftentimes don't have the tools yet to help kids manage their trauma. And so what this Project Restore is the way of training teachers to learn how to not only do some self-care for themselves, but then also manage their own self. And before I find that the videos series, let me go ahead and have station identification. And so we are watching the Ask Dr. Be Good show on the JP, Kathy, and the Crew network. And you can catch JP, Kathy, and the Crew every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday from 7:30 to 9 a.m. And they do a rebroadcast at noon in case you can't make it up that early or you're teaching or working. And so you have the opportunity to watch it really anytime you want because it's on the Facebook page as well. And that JP, Kathy, and the Crew, I want to say, gave me my start in radio. And now I'm using my podcast skills to also be able to help teachers manage their own care to the point video series. And the first one is Understanding Trauma and Its Impact. 30 minutes, just 30-minute videos. The second one is Understanding Your Experience and Building Resilience. And not only do we want to do that with ourselves, but then we get to show kids how to do that as well. Then the third one is Understanding Your Students' Experience. You know, a lot of times we adults, we get absorbed in what's happening to us, and we really haven't taken the reflection time to think about how all of this impacted our students and how it might have impacted different students in different ways, right? And so that is a very needed skill to learn. And then the next one is Building Secure Relationships, which we all know you can't teach them until you reach them, right? The last one is the sixth video series in the series is Building Strong Partnerships with Students.
I'm sorry, you froze. I couldn't.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, so I've read the 6 video series titles. You're a teacher. You've been through it, and then you've also had students go through it. So, what do you think of TEA doing this?
I think this is great. I think it really magnifies the importance of mental health care for students and teachers. I think that as we move forward, there are lots of things that students experience that teachers may not be aware of that happen, outside of the classroom. And if our students aren't mentally stable or getting those base level care that they need, it's going to be really hard for them to focus on the content in the classroom and be successful. So being able to help others increase their emotional IQ is really important, and I think it's going to benefit all teachers.
Who may be needing this, or have you been with a pretty stable crew?
I think everybody can benefit from it, even though that lots of the people and students I talk to have support systems. I think that having teachers who are aware of this information and of what could be happening outside of school is really important, and it will help them build better relationships with their students.
And that can't be anything but good, right? And unfortunately, have you seen any students who have suffered any SEL issues that had to be managed?
There's been quite a few that have and have reached out for resources, and it's been nice to be able to give them a list of resources or have it on hand, because our school partners with Peer Health Exchange. And when COVID happened, they provided us and our teachers with a list of resources for our specific area for our students if they needed any help.
Wow, have you found that COVID has brought out more opportunity for that? I don't want to put words in your mouth, but it seems like to me that we have benefited more with SEL opportunities than in the past.
Yeah, I think teachers and other educators are more aware of how beneficial social emotional learning is to the students, and showing a little grace in the classroom and outside of it for those students changes their perspective on you a great deal. Because I know my students know they can come to me and ask for extensions, no questions asked during this time, because I know what their home life is like, and I know what's going on for them. It may not be that they have like an awful home life, but they have more responsibilities around the house, so they might need an extra day to complete this because they're helping their younger siblings complete their assignments or stay on task while they're in classes.
So you're making me think of synchronous and asynchronous again. Have you felt like the asynchronous instructional plan gives families the freedom to be able to have those kids be more responsible and yet get their schoolwork done?
I think it allows families to develop their own home schedules, which in return allows more responsibility. So I know that there are a lot of families that do things together during the day, and that when they come home in the afternoon, the parents say, okay, from this time to this time, I really need you to sit down with your brother or sister and help them with their work. And then, if you could continue on with your work after that. And a lot of them have been successful with prioritizing their work and knowing that, okay, I have this much time to get my stuff done. I'm going to be responsible. I'm going to step up and take care of it.
Yeah, and I do know that a lot of our students, especially our older students, culturally, their parents don't want to see them home all day when they could be working. And so yes, we do have students who used to go to school all day. Now they work part-time and they go to school asynchronously and get, they get to be counted present, but they're working.
Yeah, and I think that's a great opportunity that teachers have too, because they can record their sessions, and those students that might have a job to help out at home aren't missing the lectures and the important information. They're still able to get it in their own time.
Now, Brandy, I know I don't have a lot more time with you, but you are a multifaceted facilitator, and one of the jobs that you have is that you're the advocacy teacher and team lead for your district. And the reason I do this show is to get to build our advocacy army for public education. And so can you talk a little bit about what the need is out there from your perspective, and is there a message for our audience?
Yeah, so with the advocacy and leadership opportunities that I have, I right now am a coach and work with several other Dallas-Fort Worth area teachers to advocate for our schools and make sure our voice and choice are heard, and bring about messages to everybody that show how productive we are and how purposeful we are with what we do for our students. And I think that, advocating for the safety of the students and the teachers is the most important thing in a time like this. And I think that the area schools are doing a really good job of taking care of their employees and their students.
Okay, how are you trying to train others, whether staff members, your family, to become advocates for public education?
I think informing them about what's really going on. I think a lot of times people don't see the behind the scenes work because they're not teachers or educators, or they're not involved in the educational forums. And by giving them that information of what goes into everything we do, they're able to see a little bit better and understand how everything's working right now. So I just think that informing them of the processes and how decisions are made is important, so that there's more support for the ISDs and the other districts and the decisions they're making.
Districts are having to tighten their belts, right?
Mm-hmm.
I heard somebody cut $4.5 billion already towards next year's budget. I don't think that was Texas yet, but I can't imagine that that's not going to be considered. People doing that, and thank you for taking the lead in that and helping your teachers and your staff. It's not only teachers, but staff at your campus understand the need for that. So we thank you for coming on, for being the multifaceted person that you are. So we thank you so much for taking the time for being on today.
Thank you.
If you would like to have your own show on a podcast, then certainly getting in contact with JP or Kathy, content that's attractive enough to attract interested people. So if you have a show that's unique, we want to see it. JP, Kathy, and the crew. So if you have a show, you can email JP, Kathy, and the crew 3@gmail.com, or go to JP, Kathy, and the crew Facebook page and find it there. And we'll continue our segment around mental health by reminding some of you, or sharing with you, many of you may not know, that September is National Suicide Prevention Awareness Month. And the 6th through the 12th marks the National Suicide Prevention Week, and September 10th that we just had was World Suicide Day, Prevention Day, of course. And goodness gracious, never has it been more important to bring this to our attention and to understand the numbers that are around that are impacting really not only older people, but our kids as well. So suicide is the 4th leading cause of death for ages 35 to 54, and the 2nd for ages 10 to 34. The suicide rate increased 33% from 1999 to 2019, and its impact on the suicide rate, the Mayo Clinic reported emotional and mental stress to the people around us, right? Fear, anxiety, depression can stem from a wide range of concerns and experiences, from personal and family issues to work-related issues. The COVID-19 pandemic has exposed enormous inequities in our society that put particularly Black and brown folks at greater risk of health disparities than white folks. Continues suicidal or weak. And that's, people who are suicidal. This highlighted 14 problems that occurred with suicide deaths between the ages of 10 and 24. School problems, arguments or conflict, intimate partner problems, family relationship issues were most often cited. Crisis preceding or upcoming and a 2-week period topped the list. So oftentimes a crisis that happened or an upcoming crisis can trigger that. And a few tips for parents include restrict access to lethal means. If you have guns in the house, if the child has spoken of a preferred method, because they do that. That's how we catch them in schools. They will actually be able to verbalize a plan A and a plan B, or a teacher will catch some writings that a student has done where they are sending messages that they don't want to live anymore. Another tip is technology isn't bad, but youth watching videos about self-harm or how to kill themselves isn't good. So, and they do that, folks. Kids send us messages. Oftentimes, we ignore the messages because our minds won't let us go that far with our own kids, that our kids could be that serious and actually follow through. Oftentimes, parents poo-poo things and say, oh, they're just wanting to do that for attention. Folks, we have to listen to our kids. Now, there are ways of handling kids who are not serious, and there are ways of catching that as well, and the schools can help you with that. The schools have a behavior crisis team that they have, and they also have outside behavior crisis teams that can be triggered when a child says he or she wants to kill themselves. And let me give you a couple of scenarios. One is an easy one. We had a young man who, through who knows why, but he felt the need to say that he wanted to kill himself. There had been trouble with the child off and on. The child was an older student and did not want to really obey the school rules. And so the school did everything they were supposed to until the point where the child had to be expelled. The child then claimed that he was suicidal. We, because he said that, were forced to call the outside crisis team, a mobile crisis team. They came out, did an assessment, and through chatting with the young man and going through their risk assessment protocol, they could tell that the child had not done that intentionally, that the child had done that sort of to get his own way. And so there are ways for schools and the professionals, the mental health professionals that are attached to schools, to be able to help parents manage kids who are suicidal, whether it's true or not. Let me give you another story. We had a young lady from a culture that does not feel yet that going to a counselor is a right thing to do. They felt it was a loss of, it was shameful to trigger a trip to the counselor. The young lady had written, she was a sixth grader, she had written several times that she was angry at her father. Her father was abusive at home to her mother. The father had some outside illicit behavior, and the young lady was very, very unhappy with the home life and wrote about it. And the counselors did do what they were supposed to do. They gave a risk assessment. She had a plan. She had a plan B. And so we asked the parents to take her to the counselor. They flat out refused on several occasions. And we finally said she can't come back until she gets an assessment. The parents took her, and sure enough, she was deemed to be in depression. They gave her medicine. They put her on visits to come to visit with the counselor. And all of that took a year. Okay, towards the end of the years, when we finally got her on meds and visitation to a counselor, and then we sent, school ended, sent her home, and what we now understand is that not a healthy home environment. The dad was coming to pick up the kids for his visitation. The girl did not want to go. She told her mother she didn't want to go. Her mother insisted that she had to go. And the girl told her mother, I will kill myself if you make me go. And the mother said, go get your bag. Unfortunately, the brother then, when he went to get her, when dad arrived and found her, she had hung herself. And so, folks, we have got to get better at listening to our kids and listening to the messages that our kids are telling us, because they tell us messages early on. there's lots of messaging that happens with kids who ultimately commit suicide. And when we get better at watching for the signs or believing the signs, and maybe getting help, even if it's just at first involving the school to verify what you think you're seeing, but we've got to be more open to what our kids are telling us. So September is, it's a long title here, National Suicide Prevention Awareness Month. And again, it's all about building that relationship with your kids. It's all about getting to the point where your kids are comfortable talking to you and you're comfortable listening to them. Because sometimes what they're telling us is hard to hear. We don't want to hear it. It's just, we either don't want to believe them, or we ignore signs because we're busy. We're trying to navigate our own COVID insecurities and uncomfortablenesses and so forth. And we fail to pay attention to our kids the way they need them to be paid attention to. So, so let's talk about something a little bit more uplifting now. And there's an article about teens who that they felt very loved by their parents. They did not cyberbully, but those who did not feel very loved by their parents had a 6 times greater chance of cyberbullying. And, you know, again, that sort of goes with this message that we're hearing about with the suicide, and listening to our kids and building that relationship with our kids to the point where they feel heard, they feel seen, right? And they feel like they're an important part of the family unit. So how can we do that, right? How can we get to the point where our kids feel seen, heard, and part of the family unit? Well, first of all, if we haven't done this as a family yet, it's time to sort of come together as a family, sit down together, and look at our daily and weekly routines. Are our daily and weekly routines leading to a time of family reflection, families eating together, families doing things together? Because remember, a routine is needed for kids to feel the boundaries, right? This is not the first time we've chatted about that. For those of you who are returning listeners, I've often talked about the need for kids to, hopefully that is, you're eating together when everybody's together, home from work, school is finished up, and you eat dinner together and then go on a walk together. The weather's getting nice again and it's not too hot. If you've got the dogs, take the dog for a walk with the family and just be outside, be together, notice the changes in the environment, because there's already some changes of leaves on the trees, in the grass. Some of it depends on where in the country you are, but you're already starting to see some of the fall creeping in, fall color. And just be together, and 3,000 steps before you go home, 5,000 steps. And this is reminding me of COVID safety. Remember, I wrote an article about this for LinkedIn and I did a show on it. How do you know if your family is ready to go back to school? Well, one of the tough things is your family healthy, right? Are you eating well, exercising, and managing stress such that your immune systems are, I'll be happy to lead you through the process of negotiating school management. Because oftentimes parents don't understand the power they have. And the school that has the power because they know the rules, right? And if the parent doesn't know the rules of the way that school is supposed to function, then oftentimes schools can get away with things that they shouldn't get away with, frankly. I've been a parent advocate for many cases, and I've not lost one yet, unfortunately. And I say unfortunately because I wish the schools weren't so sloppy. But schools can be sloppy. They can. And so oftentimes the sloppiness is hidden by rigidity in what is being told to the parents. We can't because. And it's like when I'm told these stories, all I have to do is look at the rules and the laws and the statutes or in the education code. And I can oftentimes just put in the hands of parents the right statute, the education code statute or law around that issue. And the school has to go, ooh, okay, sorry. And so then all of a sudden the power shifts to the parent in the sense that they can finally start making some headway in the school to get their child the help that their child needs. And although I mostly do special ed, sometimes it can just be other things, grades, discipline. And so I'm here for you. Now, I'm also here for educators. If you are a teacher and you have a principal that is not allowing certain things, and it would depend on the case, but if a principal seems unreasonable in not allowing certain things, then if we're full of anxiety, it's hard for us to be a good teacher, right? And if our principal is draining us, well, then there's not much left to get to the kids, right? So that's my work. And I hope that some of you, if you are in a pub ed quandary, that you will reach out and let me help you. As always, time is not our friend, and it certainly has gone by quick today. You're on the Ask Dr. Be Good show on the JP, Kathy, and the Crew Network. And remember, if you have a unique show idea, then reach out to JP, Kathy, and the Crew on their Facebook page, or JP, Kathy, and the Crew 3 at Gmail. And it's Kathy with a K. And pitch your idea. They're looking for shows. They've got, within a short period of time, they've had 12. And so they're filling up fast. But thank you for being on, and we will see you again next week. Thanks, everyone.